welcome to it is June, right? Yes, June edition of the Patch Tuesday Support Group, a safe place to talk about patching and all that for all who love them. I am joined, as always, by Jordan, my coworker Jordan, and Jake. And this month, we are joined by our new employee at Recast. Oh crap! At Patch My PC, Rudy Ooms. Wow.
Thank you, and love how you
up.
pronounce my last name.
Did I get it right, even remotely?
Yeah,
No?
somehow, somewhere,
How,
yeah.
No. How is it correctly pronounced?
You pronounce it as Ooms.
Ooms?
Ooms. Yeah.
Okay.
Ooms,
like
Ooms, but yeah, it is Ooms.
I'm sensing a pattern here, Brian, with pronunciation challenges
that you have. No, yeah. I totally agree. It's all on this side of the table. But anyways, very excited to have you both on the team, but also excited to have you here on this webinar because you have been diving deeper into some of these things than anyone else I know, and there's some good stuff to talk about this month.
Yep,
so
there is.
As our general pattern, I'm going to hand it over to Jordan. He's going to give us the rundown on this month's set of security and Microsoft and third-party patches releases. Jake's going to be here monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and he'll interrupt us when he wants to. Rudy, go ahead and interrupt us at any point, and just you can crap all over what the things we're doing. By all means, have fun. And then I will do news, and then we're going to hand it over to Rudy to speak about the new Autopilot, not V2.
You're not going to call it version 2, right?
No. Well, we can have that debate later.
Yeah.
But anyways, Jordan, over to you, sir.
All right. So this month in the wonderful world of patches, what do we have rolling up for us? Not but a wonderful 58 unique CVEs this month, which is a little bit odd. It feels like, I don't want to say, like low. Like we should celebrate that. Like we should be excited about it. But like, I ran the results for it yesterday, and I sent them over, and I went, "This is wrong." Like I don't know why, but like this just seems wrong. And then I ran it again on Wednesday. It said the same thing, so I said, "I guess it's right." So we only had one critical update this month, or one critical CVE, I should say, this month. 50 that classified into the important, and then 7 that didn't even get a classification in terms of the unique CVEs that we had. Of those CVEs, the way they broke down, we had 5 that resulted in a denial of service. We had 25 that resulted in a escalation of privilege, 3 that resulted in a potential information disclosure, and 18 that were remote code execution for it as well. As we head on up to the bridge for a situation report here, we do have a couple of items that are worth noting from the patches this month. In particular, one that Brian, we talked a little bit about last month. CURL is finally updated. Rejoice!
Yeah, they finally updated it.
It's updated now. So
it's only
if
been,
you are applying this month's cumulative updates,
6 to 8 months?
It's fine. It's fine. It only took them a little while to figure out that, oh, hey, we need to recompile this and build it ourselves since it's a custom Windows file. It's fine. Inside of it. And so if you have version 8.7.1, you should now have the updated and correct version. This should be included in the cumulative monthly patches, basically, for the current supported operating systems. I'm not going to do the guys the whole long run through 8 KVs that are all the same thing. It's the cumulative updates. You should apply them. It will fix your curl problem. One other thing that is worth, however, noting is the KBs 5039227, KB 5039217, and KB 5039214. These are the server 2022, 2019, and 2016 respectively patches. If you are running Auth-Lite in your environment, which is a piece of software that is leveraged for doing two-factor authentication, it's basically a third-party solution for doing some 2FA. If you are running that, it is something that goes on domain controllers. It will break two-factor authentication, apparently. There's not a fix for it yet, but it is something that has been trending out on some of the different solutions that are out there for what people are watching about. But other than that, there hasn't been any other major reports back of like, oh, goodness, this has broken everything in terms of patching. Other than, hey, if you do use Auth-Lite and you have those domain controllers running 2022, 2019, or 2016, did it come out last night? Okay, cool. I haven't gotten that far yet in reading things this morning then. So it sounds like maybe there is a fix that has starting to ship along the way. Then somebody in the chat here actually commented, it sounds like Auth-Lite might have built a fix yet at this point for it. But just make sure that you're doing the things you need to do in the right order. I'm going to take a wild guess. You probably need to update Auth-Lite first and then apply your Windows patches for it. One other thing that I do want to jump into, the one critical scary patch this month that did come out, as we like to touch on scary things, shouldn't, hopefully, for most of you, be that scary. So there was one big critical 0 day, and it was CVE 2024-30080. Again, that is CVE 2024-30080. This only matters to you if you have the Microsoft Message Queue service enabled. For those of you who maybe don't know what the Microsoft Message Queue service is, it's something that can get used in a bunch of different applications for things like cycling between hosts in a cluster and a couple of different things like that. It is not something that is enabled and on by default for it. It is a very, very old service in general, but if you have it on, it is enabled and listening on port 1801, then you should probably worry about it and you should do something about that. Other than that, there weren't any like super like terrifying critical. There was something that was from 2023. There was some DNSSEC stuff, as well as some other DNS conversations that have been happening around like, how do we work on doing DNS things for doing zero trust? It turns out it's really hard to actually make that work the way you intend. But other than that, nothing too terribly terrifying that has come out. The CVE for MMSQ, that was CVE 2024-30080. Go ahead and post the number there in the chat for you or somebody else. Okay, somebody else already got it. Fantastic. Thank you. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our third-party updates from Patch My PC this past month. This past month, we did release 2,507 updates. More than just a couple, turns out. Of them, we did have some severities that were assigned. We had 98 that received a severity assignment of critical, 507 that were important, 1,834 moderates, 11 lows, and 57 that we didn't assign a criticality to. Everybody's favorite time of the month, browser wars, Google Chrome coming in with a hot 18 patches, Firefox, as usual, across all the supported languages, coming in with a whopping 180, Edge with 21, and Opera with 12. In terms of vulnerabilities that you may or may not care about this particular month of the third-party batch variety, the big one to care about is CVE 2024-5274, and it comes to you by no one other than, and it should surprise nobody, it's another Google Chrome 0 day. This is a Chromium platform bug, yet again. As a side note, this is not just exclusive to Chrome. It is a Chromium platform bug, so things that are using Chromium, Edge, and other things like that that might be using it underneath it can also be susceptible to this. For it. This was marked as an 8.8, but basically there was type confusion where inside of the sandbox using a crafted HTML page, so if a user opens a HTML page from something like an email attachment or anything like that, that a remote attacker can run arbitrary code. And if you can convince somebody to run your code on their box, it's not their box anymore, which I think is like rule number 3 in the rules of immutable laws of security. So anything other than that, that's all I got here. I know I got a couple of things that I want to touch on that are news related, but I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Bryan, to get us started in the news.
Okay. All right. We'll see if I miss anything that you have in your mind. I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll try that with sure. So right off the bat, we're going to do what I usually do, which is we'll talk about some security related stuff, and then we'll kind of dive into some releases and some notifications from Microsoft and otherwhere. Mnemonic, there was an active exploit of a remote access VPN. So if you are a user of Checkpoint, you are going to want to go ahead and check that out. This actually thought it wasn't quite as bad, and then it got worse. So it got bumped up to 8.6 from a 7.5 when proof of concept code came out. So if if you are using Checkpoint, you should definitely check that out.
I would also add to Checkpoint does get used. What I have found is for a lot of smaller organizations in general. So if you happen to be an MSP and you're on this call, definitely check with a lot of the smaller organizations or your government organizations and things like that. I know a lot of like the smaller like county types of governments in the US use a lot of those, the Checkpoints type stuff. So definitely do a double check to figure out what you do and don't have on that one. That was all.
There's also this Snowflake. This made a bit of the rounds. If you are a Snowflake customer, you might ask what Snowflake is. Snowflake is essentially a cloud database solution. But if you were storing data there, they had a pretty not great. I shouldn't say this. They didn't really have a vulnerability, but what has happened is that we talked several months ago about how there was a release of basically a trove of stolen credentials, and it wasn't a new hack. It was just okay. Some group just bought up a whole bunch of different databases of username and passwords and shoved it all together and made it widely available. Well, hey, guess what? A lot of people were apparently using those credentials in Snowflake, and so there's no actual vulnerability, but there has been a noticeable increase in attacks upon Snowflakes, and this is just one of those typical stories that there's no MFA. Some of the passwords were over 4 years old, right? These are passwords that were found at an attack 4 years ago, and they are now being reused and are allowing people to get access to literally the proverbial keys to the kingdom of data that's being stored on Snowflake. So again, this isn't it's not a vulnerability in Snowflake, but isn't an attack based on some pretty low effort things that you can go fix. So just go ahead and take a look at that if you're using that Snowflake. That is another one this is an interesting article to read. If you're a system administrator, you have a love-hate relationship with the developers in your organization. They often want to run admin because they're writing code. I mean, I literally have Visual Studio running right now, and so there's times when that just has to run as admin. Otherwise, I can't do my job of writing code. And so I don't say there's a lot of trust, but we often give developers a lot of exceptions to running as a regular user or non-privileged user. And this may shock nobody here. Maybe that was trust that was misplaced. Basically what the guys found is, hey, we can literally just post, they just name squatted a popular theme for Visual Studio and then just added code in there to have that theme literally make a socket connection to a central server and give some identifying information. They were trying that as a proof of concept, right? And they had millions of people downloaded it, and then they started looking at other code of other extensions for Visual Studio and found a lot of concerning things. So, yeah. Am I missing? Yeah. Thank you, Damien. You are correcting me. It's VS Code. And I was saying Visual Studio, and sorry, I have both of them, so I sometimes mix them up when I should not.
Well, let's be clear, right? Like, yes, it happened to VS Code, right? But this is not a VS Code exclusive necessarily thing, right? And this is one of those big things, I was actually talking with somebody internally recently about this. Was like, this is one of those big things where EDR and stuff like that.
Was it somebody internally that had Darkula official installed?
It was somebody internally that had Dracula. Like the actual, because we were joking about it because we both used Dracula. But like the actual version of it, the real version of it. So like when it came out, we saw it. When this came out, we saw it and we were like, oh, well, that's terrible that people got, hit by that. But like we were chatting about it, like this is one of those big reasons, like in general, why something like an EDR like really, really matters, where you were watching and being able to create different notifications for like, why is this machine suddenly doing this strange thing where it's posting weird commands? VS Code in general, those kind of some interesting things in general that are kind of odd behaviors when it installs plugins, as a side note. A lot of the different plugins, both for Visual Studio and VS Code, both do this super awesome thing where they run encoded PowerShell in order to install things and download stuff from the internet. I don't know why they do that as a design decision, but that's the exact same pattern a lot of the time that, threat actors use, is they leverage encoded PowerShell commands running behind the scenes in order to download and upload content or payloads. So there's a lot of things just in general that from an EDR perspective, you can kind of start to dig into and like look at and watch for that those things call as child processes. And you should do that above and beyond.
Okay. Awesome. Moving along, some interesting deprecated features here in Windows. The first I'm going to talk about is DirectAccess. Now, that's not super shocking to anyone, I think, at this point. Even Richard Hicks, who talks about has been talking about DirectAccess for as long as I only know of DirectAccess because he started talking about it. Not shocking to see this deprecated. It has been essentially superseded by Always On VPN, which is another VPN client that's built right into Windows OS, or just not needing a VPN at all, which is a whole other thing. But DirectAccess for sure has been on the chopping block for a while, and they finally just called a spade a spade. So if you're using DirectAccess and you're holding on to it for some reason, those might be valid reasons. I'm not the expert here, but definitely in the next, you got until June 2024, some release of Windows 11, my guess, will no longer include it. The bigger one, the more interesting one, is NTLM. And again, Jordan, I know has some thoughts on this. NTLM has been a source of vulnerabilities for quite some time. It's needed to die, but it's also really kind of used by some things, and so it's not surprising to see them put it on the chopping block. Will it actually happen in June 2024? I mean, I think that will depend on how poorly it goes, which could be pretty poorly.
There's a lot of on-prem stuff that still wants to use this. I think June 2024 is I think it was October. I think they said October's when I think they're trying to actually kill it. I know it's announced now, but I think they actually made an early thing that they want to try and kill it as early as October. And I will be impressed if they hit that target significantly, because it kind of has a lot of the same challenges that Exchange with basic auth does, right? Like there's a lot of services and a lot of things that are using that underneath the covers, behind the sheets, and everywhere else under the sun, right? Still, even now, I mean, they shouldn't be, and it should make you sad when you find out that they are. But it's a thing. So we'll see what happens. It's gonna be interesting.
I do want to clarify. I literally just realized like 5 seconds ago it's actually 2024. When did it become 2024? When did we come to this year?
6 months ago. It's fine.
Okay. So anyway, sorry. Because with DirectAccess, I said like in June 2020. So I actually don't know when it'll be removed then, I guess. Yes.
It's just announced now. Yeah.
I know, right.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt too, and I'm going to go back to one we were talking about earlier. I know Jordan mentioned like doing some EDR stuff, but there's a question like for the VS Code plugins as an example, how would an admin like control those? A lot of the times they're installed like in the user profile space. Like the devs like have admin permissions. Is it just like go get an EDR tool, or are there any other suggestions there?
Yeah, that's gonna fall into the bucket of good luck, unfortunately. I genuinely wish I had a better answer. This is one of the problems with plugins in general for a lot of these, right? Is like, well, especially for developers, because sorry, Brian, I'm gonna bust you real hard right now. Like developers just like need admin rights a lot of the time for running and testing things and building stuff out like that. And so short of like trying to really put in WDAC or something like that and be like, no, every other one of these types of files that isn't this can't run, right? And even that is going to make a developer's life miserable. Or trying to figure out things like putting in an EDR and watching for anomalous behavior is going to be challenging. Defender does a pretty good job of being able to figure out and spot things. I will say that, it's and it works pretty well, especially if you're a Microsoft shop for it. Check. Somebody says check recall every 5 seconds to see if it's.
Hey, we're going to talk. We'll get there. We'll get there.
I want to talk about recall.
Yeah. Oh, we will. We'll get
there. It's fine.
It's on the list.
There really isn't a good way to stop like extension management and things like that necessarily in Visual Studio and VS Code today.
Yeah, it's going to run in user space, but man, just wait for recall. So moving along here, we'll try to move a little quickly, but we'll fail at that. This was interesting. IBM just decided they're just going to get rid of one of their main legacy sort of cybersecurity software, QRadar. I don't know that it's super popular anymore, but it was a thing that I don't think many people saw coming. And so if you are using that, again, go ahead and think twice. This is another fun one, just out of interest. As we all know, we just heard this on NPR, which is here in the US, is a national public radio. They're actually talking about some of the recent hospital hacks, right? And it's a real huge problem. Jordan and I even talked about this. There's been a bunch of really crippling hacks here in the US, and the government is going to spend $50 million to try and solve it. This is if you're a system administrator, this is actually kind of a fun read, because it's kind of a boondoggle. Like they really think that they're going to basically reinvent cybersecurity and make it AI and fully automated, and take all the medical equipment hardware and replicate it. And they're putting the weight of $50 million behind it, which is
nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, which is lunch. I guess
Pennies.
they're going to buy lunch for everyone.
Yeah.
Pizza party.
It's just so funny. It's worth a read again especially if you're in any of the medical space.
And just to put this into context for people in terms of like how much impact this is having, I think we talked last month about a certain healthcare organization that had undergone a ransomware attack, or a cybersecurity event, at least I think is what it's still being called. Is that, and that it is still being tracked as an open incident, and it is now, let's see, that started the first week of May, and it is now the first week of June, and it is still being tracked state by state, with still having locations that don't have full functionality restored. So it's a real problem, right? But like, this isn't gonna solve it. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. There's Microsoft. We talked last month. Right, Microsoft came out with their new security initiative, which we'll get to in a hot second. We talk about recall, and so they talked. They put this out. Hey, here's what we're going to do in Windows 11 to strengthen security and all those things, including new hardware. Blah 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 blah. I'm not going to read this for you, but if you worth a read in your time. The other big announcement is that they're coming out with CoPilot PCs. And the big thing in my mind here is that it requires, and this is in tandem with actually new hardware, right? So there's actually releasing new hardware that has a NP unit, which I think is a neural processing unit. There you go, neural processing right there. I was right. And this is really just trying to run AI locally. And again, we don't have a whole lot of time. We're going to talk about recall in a hot second. But it's worth taking your time and reading into this, if only to see what is coming up as you start ordering laptops. There is a new world, including a new type of processor, which is an NPU that's intended to run AI, quote unquote, locally. So let's talk about recall for a second. So recall. Just a second.
Just a second. I mean, I guess if I go back here, no, that doesn't work. So recall. What is recall? Recall essentially is a thing that's going to take screenshots every few seconds or so of your screen, and then use AI to process what it sees on that screen. And the idea is that you can then using kind of an AI prompt, you can say, hey, you can ask it questions and it will go back and bring you the screenshots of things you
help me recall what I was doing 5 minutes ago.
Right, exactly. Now, Microsoft, when they talked about this, they said, well, hey, instantly some red flags start going up, but they're like, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. Like, this isn't AI in the cloud, right? Like, we're not shoving this data and we're not putting it in the cloud. Nobody else is going to have access. It's all local, and that is technically true so far. Absolutely, it is all local. But what's also true is that it's literally storing it in a plain text SQL database. Well, what?
For now.
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
totally true.
They've announced that they're doing improvements, but yes.
Well, we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
It only took a whole community to complain about it for them to do it.
Right. We're gonna get to that part, right? But like, okay, we go look at it. What are they doing? And you might ask, what kinds of things are in there? And literally everything you might type. So I mean, absolutely, you can ask it for like passwords, and it will turn you your passwords. Any sort, all shades of violations here that could happen. HIPAA seems horrible, but there's also some FUD that kind of went around. Like Kevin Beaumont, you should go read this article. It's a good article. Exactly, right? So Timothy, it's a keylogger. If you remember years ago, we dealt with HP audio driver, logging every key. Like, okay, is that it is a keylogger, but it's not like was it uploading it to the cloud somewhere? No, but the fact is there's this unprotected file in user space that anyone who can now run any, we go talk about those VS Code extensions. Great. Now they don't need a keylogger. It's already built into the system, right? It's right there. And that's really where recall rightfully got a bad name. Now, some people are like, okay, well, you can get it remotely, and other non-admin users. No, I mean, it is essentially a file on the PC with a lot of really sensitive information that's not well protected. So if you can run code as user, you could extract it. If you could run code as the local admin, you could also extract somebody else's data. But again, we go back to those VS Code extensions, like, okay, yeah, it's not unthinkable to run vulnerabilities in user space, right? Like it's not you don't need escalation of privilege. You just need to get somebody to run some code that has access to that file.
Well, and even let's take the other extreme of that too, right? Like companies and like what's valuable to a company is a very interesting thing over time, right? Like what's valuable and like how you can get money out of it, right? Like companies right now, the big part of there's two halves of the ransomware equation in general, like why you get ransomware for it. Is because they think that they can get you to pay the money to decrypt it. But the other half of that is the blackmail component of it for if they can take that data, right? So that then they can pull that data out. Now, imagine a world in which I get access to your administrative environment, your RMM tooling in the infrastructure for it, and I leverage that tooling to start interacting with recall on every single machine to pull the personal information from every single one of those out into a centralized location and upload it into Blob. Now I get blackmail material potentially for anything that you've ever done on that machine, passwords to things, for anything that you may have personally used it for, this, that, the other thing, right? So I get to try to go after you personally as well as professionally. Ever read an email about your kids in it or anything like that along the way? All of that data suddenly became on the table to be centrally gathered and exfiltrated if it had stayed in its original state.
Well, and there's a chat and there were a question in the chat too. Like, is this something that we can hard block? And yes, there are registry keys that you'll be able to like disable. They've already been posted online, but I imagine that the number of registry keys will only increase over time.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's move on to that, right? So I will say there's already several open source Git projects opened up to like exfiltrate this info. But I do want to just again, none of it is you need local admin or you need to run it as that user. So Microsoft, after like complete radio silence for like the better part of a week, came out and they're like, okay, yeah, maybe that was not a great idea. And very specifically, they are no longer going to turn it on by default. So initially, that was the announcement that, hey, by default, recall is going to get enabled on these devices, and they have gone ahead and walked that back. And the timing of this whole thing is kind of, problematic for them because Microsoft, like was last month, we're talking about how they got slapped by the by the U.S. government essentially, and being told, and Satya was sort of forced to come out and say, hey, if we're going to choose features or security, we will choose security. And then literally minutes later, let's talk about recall. And it is bad timing, but my personal take on this is like recall is powered by hardware, right? There's no, this has been in the works for
months,
at least a year,
if not years.
I mean, that's what I mean. Like you don't just design a new whole genre of hardware, which is an NPU, and then like get it through the pipeline of actually manufacturing it at scale to sell to retail in single digit months, right? So this was all baked in and ready to go a long time ago, and boy, does it just the timing of it is just makes you laugh. There's nothing you can do other than chuckle, because absolutely 100% they put features over security on this one. And so it's good that they walked it back. And it will not be on by default. As administrators, we will have to actually go ahead and, if you want to enable this, and I won't deny that there's some interesting uses for it. Like, I'm not, I know some people are like, oh, it's dumb. It could be interesting to play with, but
it's a fantastic technological achievement, right? Like, it is like especially from a like trying to build your own Jarvis perspective, right? Like, hey Jarvis, what was that appointment that I had on Monday, right?
Right.
You know, I'm using the hey Jarvis example here because, you know, Iron Man, everybody's seen that, you know, like to finally bring like the AI CoPilot experience, pick your flavor and name for it, right? Like to bring it to that level where you can contextually say like, hey, remind me that thing from earlier this week, right? Oh, that I was looking at. That's a really cool technology jump, and then the following jumps that then happen after that, right? But the way that the initial release / announcement for it has now gone through, right? Like it's really going to be a tough pill for people to like to swallow, you know, to like it's also incredibly dangerous without all of the needed safeguards for it.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, I think we've kind of boiled that ocean. I'm not going to talk about this a whole lot because this is what Rudy's here to go, but I'm just, I had these in my big list of things. So the other sort of big announcement this month is talking about the next generation of Autopilot. I'd love to hear, Rudy, you tell me why it's not V2, because it sure feels like V2. And then here's Rudy's, what's that? Go for it.
Do you really think it's Autopilot version 2? Yeah, maybe I shouldn't pronounce it Autopilot version 2 a couple of months ago, but yeah, apparently that name was still sticking.
Okay. It seems, I mean, if V1's still around and has no end date, then it seems like, I don't know, what is this? What if this isn't V2, what is it?
Yeah, apparently it's, well, at least I started calling it Autopilot version 2 at the beginning because it's in the code and you write code. So
yes,
if I'm looking at the Intune management extension DLL files and the Windows Management Service DLL files, they have put it in as APV2, Autopilot version 2. So yeah, I get it that they also Microsoft are naming things that could be a little bit funny sometimes, but yeah, they should have called it differently at first. But yeah, they came up with Autopilot version 2, but it's, in my opinion, something totally different. It's, if you ask me, it's not even Autopilot, because the whole idea that about Autopilot, at least in my brains, if we go down on a trip to a couple of years ago, when Autopilot was first released, it was built upon the Windows activation process.
Right.
Do you remember that Windows XP when you change some hardware in your device and suddenly you get a prompt from, hey, something changed, you need to activate your Windows XP license again. That process was built upon the hardware hash. So on that same process, Autopilot relied on. So you need to have, if something changed in the hardware hash, Autopilot version 1 wasn't working, right? So in my brains, calling it Autopilot device preparation, it's not even Autopilot because Autopilot was built upon the Windows activation process, and now we have something brand new. That because at first when with Autopilot version 1, let's say it that way, when you turn on your device, the device would reach out to the ZTD, to the Autopilot service to find the proper Autopilot profile, and all with a few steps in between, but okay. And at the end, it would download the Autopilot profile on the device, right? And with the Autopilot profile, you could skip all those nice questions like, do you have a personal or work, school account, everything like that. So you could just enter your corporate email address and logging into your device, right? That's Autopilot.
Okay.
The whole idea is gone with Autopilot device preparation, in my opinion.
Okay, great. So we're almost. So let me finish off these last couple slides, and then you can dig into it. I am interested on your viewpoint there, though.
Yeah.
Yes, Jordan?
I got one other thing when we do that to talk about on recall, Brian, too.
Okay.
It's related to something else, but go.
All right.
Go fast.
Okay, a couple other announcements here, and we're in the home stretch here of my part. Microsoft Intune now supports some managing some shared devices for your frontline workers, which kind of makes sense. I'm not going to go very specifically how you deal with those profiles and cleaning them up as you have a whole bunch of people using the same machine. There's some more flexible Windows Update feature. Very specifically, you can now deploy within Intune. You can deploy some feature updates as optional. So if you want to have some canaries that you simply make it allow them to opt into a new feature update, you can now do that within Intune. Windows Update for Business reports, WUPI reports, they got updated to show you devices that are missing, right? So there's always kind of this problem. There's a source of truth problem, and they're not solving that here, to be clear. But there's always a source of truth problem across all the different reporting solutions within Microsoft, both Intune and versus Config Manager and Azure and Windows Update for Business. And so they again, I don't think we're solving that problem necessarily here, but they are making some progress by allowing you to say, hey, here's the devices that should ostensibly be listed in Windows Update for Business reports, but aren't, and trying to give you some of the reasons for it. It's actually kind of tucked away in a place that I think some people haven't normally gone to, right? Like you got to click on overview and you got to click on this total devices, right? View details to then go to missing devices, right? Like I don't know how many people clicked on view details of total devices. So I feel like they've kind of hidden this, but it is there, and you can export that data and then act upon it. They also opened the beta channel for Windows 10 insiders. This feels odd. If you don't know, Windows 10 is in theory has no next feature update release, but they've opened the beta channel for Windows insiders again. So they closed it and now they brought it back, ostensibly to shove some AI. I mean, I literally don't know what they're going to do with this, but they are brought it up, which is kind of funny because, oh, I think I missed my slide here. Windows 10 Windows 10 21H2 had its last patch this month. So if you didn't know that, there you go. Here's my, I'll paste that here in the chat. Also open it up here. Windows 10 21H2, if you're running it, you got your last update this month for enterprise and education. So you need to make sure that go ahead and dies in a fire. And despite that, they are reopening insiders for Windows 10, which just seems weird. On the config manager front, there's a new technical preview this month, which is kind of fun. Not a lot here, which isn't super surprising. But if you're especially if you're using ARM devices, you want to go take a look at that. I think that's really the big one here. Lastly, just if you are using Config Manager or WSUS, know that when they initially released this month's updates, so for Windows 11, 22H2, and 23H2, they didn't mark them as superseding. And so that threw some people off because they weren't seeing last month's patches become superseded. Microsoft has gone and fixed that. They've republished them. So if you're using Config Manager or WSUS, go ahead and sync again if you want, and you will see those supersedings come through. And then finally, finishing off, not a lot of new things within Intune. Autopilot notwithstanding, technically it's not an Intune feature. Not a lot here. There is some self-service access to. Where is this? I can't find it. There's some self-service access to BitLocker keys. If somebody deletes a device, you can now monitor that. So if somebody's deleting the device out of Intune, that's actually tracked, and you can go ahead and figure out who did that and when. And then, as I already mentioned, there's optional feature updates. So, Jordan, what did you want to talk about? Your last little thing? While I stop my screen share here.
While you share Discord.
I guess.
So I wanted to go back on recall, talk about recall real quick, and it's related to something else I'm going to post in the chat here, and I think we had this up here in the resources too. Which is this poll that I put out here earlier on X, Twitter, call it what you want, out here. This is around questionnaires and security questionnaires and things of that nature.
Okay.
It's related actually in part
this thing
to recall to a degree. So one of the things that I'm trying to get kind of a better feel for, and I'm genuinely curious around organizations' practices of like when you go out and you start a new negotiation with a customer or like a vendor, right? And you want to go buy something from them, right? A lot of the times now, because of regulations and requirements, things like that, you're required to do some type of security review or attestation or query or sending of questions to them. And I'm genuinely curious how much or what people's perception of the like qualitative, quantitative, pick your word there, like improvement in security that does. And the reason why I think this is related and relevant as well to recall, right, is I can totally see a world in which at some point, right, where customers will go or where people will go, like, I don't want to do business with companies that have something like recall, or I don't want to do business with this. We're already, you know, like things like AI or this, that, or the other thing. It's already started to be a thing. I know there were some presidential orders recently about AI and what should be done with it. And so I'm genuinely curious, and I want to start getting ideas and feedback from people around like that. So that's why I wanted to put it out there. If you want to send it out, it's got like 5 days worth of reach on it. And I know somebody else mentioned it. This was one of the other things I wanted to bring up too about recall. It's going to be very interesting in the future here, right? Is will the data from recall or inside of a recall vault become legally admissible in court in the future? Mm-hmm. So, for example, things like, you know, all of a sudden now you have these captures. And what about parents' rights to what kids are doing, or a school's rights to what kids are doing on a computer, this, that, or the other thing? Like, what are the legal precedents and the legal things that are here? And I'm not saying that it's a bad technology by any stretch of the means. The power and the availability for it is really, really interesting. But the potential impact on some of the other like tertiary things, right? Of like, well, I can't have a meeting with your company because you're technically recording everything that we do and you're processing it on a device in the US, right? So from an EU perspective, like, is that a problem, right? You're not, you are capturing and processing something. So Rudy, for example, I'm going to pick on you because you're from the EU here, right? If I sit down here and I am, have a meeting with you, right? My device is now capturing that data and is doing processing on it to a degree locally on my device. I am now a processor of data above and beyond the fact that we had a meeting, right? Yep, like that's true, that's fine, you know, and you may not know about it. Whereas like in a recording situation where like you join a Teams or a Zoom call, it pops up and says, hey, this meeting's being recorded, right? If it's recorded through something like recall, you may not know about it. So there's really interesting privacy subcomponents there that can have interesting impact on customer vendor relationships, on different country relationships and things like that to think about. So anyways, go vote. And I'm curious to get an idea. I think that companies are spending budget in general on interesting practices of security in the name of what regulations say. And so I'm super curious to know more about like where people think security and stuff like that should focus. Should it be focusing on trying to do these evaluations as people bring things in? Like where is that? So yeah, that's all.
All right. Thanks, Jordan. What I hear you saying is recall's awesome and everyone should use it.
That's
Absolutely.
literally what he said.
All your data.
Yeah,
all your data belongs to me.
Yeah, that's what I heard at least.
Yeah.
You know, I also don't know.
I thought it was only me hearing that, but
yeah, I also don't know what year it is. So I mean, you know, take that with a grain of salt. All right, Rudy. We sort of buried the lead there a little bit. There's a new Autopilot V something. Whatever you want to call it. And take it away. Tell us what you want to tell us. What should we know?
Well, what you want to know about it? Well, in my opinion, Autopilot version 2 is something totally new, and you can't even call it Autopilot version 2 because it's more like a new enrollment process, a new enrollment type instead of Autopilot. But yeah, Microsoft needed to come up with a solution to make sure that all the governments that are in America can use Autopilot. And if you want to use the previous version of Autopilot, some may say it's not required, but it relies on the hardware. The whole process around it is based on the hardware. And somehow governments didn't like that idea that a lot of hardware details were stored somewhere. At least that is how I'm reading the documentation that Microsoft put online, because in the documentation they are mentioning the fact that with Autopilot device preparation, the American governments can now use Autopilot to enroll all of their devices in a big scope. So in my opinion, Autopilot version 2, Autopilot device preparation, maybe we should start a poll or something who has a better name for it. But in my opinion,
so quick question for you, Rudy. Like, is current Autopilot, is that in GCC? Like, I guess I don't even know.
Yeah, no. The old version not.
Okay.
They don't use it apparently.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was.
I was a little bit. a couple of weeks ago, if you asked me that question, I should probably give you a different answer. But yeah.
Okay.
So Autopilot version 2 is for governments, but even when I look at it, the whole flow is way better of what happens in the background. It's if you think about the original idea about Autopilot, you buy a device, you ship it to the end user, it's home. The end user picks out the device out of the box, it turns it on, it logs in, it starts doing stuff, and the user can start working on the device, right? With Autopilot version 1, a lot of screens popped up. The whole enrollment status page, as we know, showed you a lot of information, right? And if I was the end user and I was looking at all the steps and all the things going on, I was an end user, maybe could be confused about it, right? So Microsoft decided to just change the whole idea and just only show the really necessary stuff in front. So if you're now enrolling your device, the only things that you are going to see is that the Intune management extension is going installed, and that one does all the lifting and all the hard work in the whole device preparation enrollment, because the whole enrollment status tracking that we know of, that's no longer there. The whole also the tool that Niehaus built to detect which apps are being installed, that's not working also, because the whole process is now the Bootstrapper agent and the Intune management extension are going to take care of that whole process. So detecting which apps are going to be installed using the old enrollment status tracking, that's not going to work. So the whole flow, the whole idea behind it is different, but also, in my opinion, it's way better. It's, of course, Autopilot device preparation can have its issues, because, of course, you are not using the hash anymore, because you can just enroll it with your user. When you're configuring an Autopilot device preparation profile, you only need to define a device group and a user group. The user group, that's your regular user that needs to be onboarded with Autopilot device preparation. And the device group, that's also something new. That's a just-in-time or an enrollment time grouping. There are two names, but it's actually the same thing, because if you look in graph, you can see the just-in-time configuration graph URL, but they're going to call it the enrollment time grouping. When you're going to enroll your device by signing in with your user, the moment you sign in with your user, the device will get onboarded into Entra. From there on, it will get enrolled into Intune. And at that point in time, exactly when the Intune certificate comes down to your device, the device will receive the Autopilot profile. So it's way later on the device getting its profile. So all the OOP questions, all the out-of-box questions you could get, you're still going to get it. So if you're not using Windows 11 Enterprise, you're going to have all those nice questions popping up. So that can be a little bit weird for the end user to notice that, but I'm hoping Microsoft is going to fix it at the end eventually, but okay. So when the user signs in, the device becomes Entra joined, Intune enrolled, the Intune set arrives on the device, and at that moment, the Intune management extension is getting installed, and that is going to do all the hard work. And the Intune management extension is going to have a continuous talk with the service in the back end. So it is going to check the device group that I was just talking about, the just-in-time group. The moment you enroll your device into Entra, the device will be placed automatically in that group. So the whole idea about using dynamic groups, that's gone, because the device will be automatically be placed in one group, which I think is a very cool thing, because you really don't have to do anything for it. And the device group that needs to be assigned to all the apps, all the scripts you want to deploy. Also a good thing to mention, because when configuring the Autopilot profile, you can only assign a max of 10 apps to the profile. All the stories that I have heard that people were just assigning like 20, 30 required apps to the profile, that's, in my opinion, bananas, because if you're going to assign 30 required apps to your Autopilot profile, that's going to take a lot of time. And I know you know the best, because an application can fail under each circumstance. So yeah, it can fail because something happened, something blocks it, another engine policy is getting in the way. So if you have 30 apps,
it's kind of like what they do. Apps are there to fail, really.
Yeah,
not be
exactly.
installed or
So
used.
you don't want that. So I'm glad that they decided to minimize the amount of apps you can assign in the Autopilot profile. So the whole process that is going to happen is totally different, because now I need to laugh because the Jake picture showed up. But yeah, the whole idea about Autopilot is it's not Autopilot in my opinion. It's something way better, but it's not Autopilot. So yeah, the hardware hash is gone. At least that's a good thing. But if you're not using the hardware hash, I assume in the bigger companies, they are not going to allow personal devices to be enrolled, right? Because yeah, you have a personal device.
That was my slight confusion, and I know you've talked a little bit about it, which is like, okay, so now any user can enroll a device, but then you can upload your own, like enterprises can upload their own, what is it, serial number, make and model? Is that it?
Yeah, but in the past, or the manufacturers, they can upload the CSV, that kind of thing. But then it will still become an Autopilot version 1 device. And if your device is marked as an Autopilot version 1 device, your device will always go into the Autopilot version 1 flow. So the suppliers can't do that anymore if you want to use Autopilot version 2. If you are going to block personal devices and you have an Autopilot device preparation device, or that device that needs to be enrolled with Autopilot device preparation, and you are blocking personal devices, you now need to make sure that you are going to upload a corporate identifier, which was working, which now isn't working. But the whole idea is that you are going to upload a CSV with, guess what? What's in that CSV? The same information. Yeah, the same information to make sure that the device that is getting enrolled will be will be allowed to enroll, because an Autopilot device is always a corporate device. That's clear. But the whole idea about blocking personal devices, and Autopilot always been a corporate device, that's hard to explain in my opinion, because even I find it hard to explain to a customer that, hey, I have Autopilot device preparation. It's always marked as a corporate device, but I have a personal enrollment restriction in place to block personal devices, and now my Autopilot device preparation device is getting blocked by it. That's weird. And with corporate identifiers, you can remove, you can make sure that the device is still allowed to enroll. But yeah, apparently they found something weird in that corporate identifier stuff thing, I assume, because I was looking at it, it was working, at least for my virtual machine. But yeah, that's just a virtual machine. I can think that all kinds of devices, maybe they weren't working with the corporate identifier, but not sure. And it was now not possible to upload it any longer, but that's how it goes, I assume. But yeah, Autopilot version 2, and looking at the whole flow behind it, the corporate identifiers is one, and the hardware hash is one. But while I was looking at the whole device preparation flow, which you also pointed out in the blog you showed, I found two nice bugs in that whole process, because one of them
of course you did, Rudy.
Yeah, one of them
Did you also submit a pull request to fix them? Because it seems like at this point you should just submit the PR.
Yeah, it's now on the known issues list, and one of them is now, if I'm not mistaken, live on the Patch My PC website, which I'm going to explain why the managed installer from WDAC is going to mess with your whole application reporting stuff. So if you have enabled the managed installer and you want to use Autopilot device preparation, yeah, please turn it off while you can turn it off, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, if you have enabled the manage installer, that was one thing. The whole reporting is broken. So if an application fails, it still continues the installation and it's marked as successful at the end. So in my opinion, that was pretty weird when I was noticing it. And the other one was if you have configured a new Entra setting, that Entra setting gives you the possibility to define which user is going to be a local administrator on the device. Because back in the days, in the Autopilot profile, we could configure if the user was a standard user of an administrator. In Entra, we had the same setting right now, but apparently Autopilot device preparation and that Entra setting, that didn't go well together, because if you configure that Entra setting to none, your Autopilot device enrollment, the device preparation enrollment, it will start installing all the required apps for just 1 second, and it will move on to 100% and will be marked as successful without all the apps being installed. So yeah, 2 bugs found within a couple of days, which was pretty funny. So yeah, I can talk about Autopilot device preparation for hours, but yeah, I guess that were my 10-15 minutes or something like that.
You got it. You nailed it. Thanks everyone again for joining us. Have a great month. We will see you all we'll see you next month.
See you next
Thanks,
month.
Rudy, thanks for joining us, Rudy. Have a good one, all.
That's all my pleasure.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Oh, well, I'll go eat lunch. Rudy's probably ready for a beer.
I'm
Jake,
ready for lunch.
First
Jake,
dinner.
Jake is looking to get squeezed.
Yeah.
That is some nightmare fuel. Thanks for bringing it.